Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Insyaallah, for today's class, we will discuss the topic of ijara. Ijara is an alternative to conventional leasing, and Islam has allowed the use of ijara in order to make the Muslims be able to use the uzufrat or the manafa'ah of a certain asset, whether they are goods or services that they do not own. For example, suppose a person doesn't have a house, right? He doesn't own any house. So it is allowed the concept of ijara so that the person who doesn't own a house can use the uzufrat or the manufa'ah of a house by paying a certain compensation we call ijara. So like any other akad in Islamic finance, ijara has to fulfill certain conditions as as outlined by the Sharia. Ijara comes from the word ajara, ajara, alif, jim, ra, ajara, which means to compensate or to give a consideration and return. Literally, ijara means to give something on rent. Ijara in the terminology of fiqh, istilahan, is a contract which permits the hiring against a certain return of both goods and services. For example, a house, a car. So using the concept of ijara, someone is allowed to use the, we call the uzufrat or the manfa'ah. What is the uzufrat of a house? Uzufrat of a house is being able to live in the house. Uzufrat of a car is being able to use the car to transport from one place to another place. So in English we call uzufrat. In Arabic, manfa'ah. In Bahasa, manafa'at. There are many definitions of ijara. According to the Hanafis, ijara refers to a contract pertaining to uzufrat. Uzufrat here is manfa'ah, or the use with a compensation. The Shafi'is defined ijara as a contract over desirable, known, permissible, and accessible uzufrat in exchange for a known compensation. And Hanbalis defined ijara as a contract for a particular permissible uzufrat, which is taken gradually for a particular period and a particular consideration. So there are many commodities which has certain uzufrats, and you can use the uzufrat without owning the property. For example, land. Okay, the uzufrat of the land is being able to plant trees on the land. So using the concept of ijara, a person is allowed, for example, to use the uzufrat of the land, means to plant trees. For example, for paddy field, using the concept of ijara, the people who pay who pay certain ijara can use the land to grow paddy. Hanbalis defined ijara as a contract for a particular permissible usufruct, a manfa'a, which is taken gradually for a particular period. It can be, in the case of paddy, it can be for one season. In the case of a car, it can be for a period of one day. For house, it can be a period of 1 month or 1 year, and a particular consideration. On the other hand, the Malikis defined ijara as the transfer of ownership of permitted usufruct for a known period in exchange for a compensation. So there are many definitions of usufruct, and the meaning is the same. Ijara means the compensation to use the usufruct of a certain commodities, whether goods or services. The term ijara, according to Malikis, is confined to the human usufruct and the movable assets, other than vessels and animals. The term ijara and kira have the same meaning, as kira usually refers to the contract on usufruct of land, houses, vessels, and animals. So usufruct, um, so ijara and kira, basically they carry the same meaning. According to the Majel, ijara is the sale of a known benefit or usufruct in return for its known equivalent of compensation. According to Alfi Sharia standard, ijara means leasing of a property pursuant to a contract under which a specified permissible benefit in the form of usufruct is obtained for a specified period in return for a specified permissible consideration or compensation. The term ijara is used for two different situations. Situation one is ijara al-mal. Ijara al-mal refers to a contract to employ the services of a person on wages. Ijara al-amal, ijaratul amal. It refers to a contract to employ the services of a person on wages given to him as a consideration for his hired service. In this context, the employer is called musta'jir, and the employee is called ajir. It's called ajir. And the wages paid to the ajir are called ujrah. This type of ijara includes every transaction where the services of a person are hired by someone else and the compensation is for the effort expended of skills used. For example, an employer or musta'jir can hire a person to do a certain job, and the employee is called ajir, and the wages is called ujrah. For example, an employer needs ajir or an employee as an assistant, and he is paid, and the compensation is called ujrah. And the second one, so that is ijaratul amal. Ijaratul amal. And the second type is ijaratul ain or ijaratul manafi'. Ijaratul ain or ijaratul manafi' is a contract to transfer the usufruct of a particular asset to another person in exchange for a rent claimed from him. For example, a house. Particular asset can be a house or a car. So it's a transfer of usufruct of the house to another person. The owner gives the right to another person to use the house in exchange for a rent, which is to be paid by the uh, by the renter. So under this contract, the ownership of the asset remains with the owner. For example, the house. The house still belongs to the owner, but the asset will be transferred to the lessee for him to derive the usufruct of the asset. But the lessee can use the usufruct, means can live in the house, of which shall be returned back upon the expiry of Ijarah contract. For example, the leasing of the house is for 1 year. So after the period of 1 year, the house is returned back to the owner. So the owner is called the lessor, and the ones who pay the rent or the ijara is called the lessee. Both types of ijara have their own set of rules. However, for the purpose of Islamic banking system, the second type of ijara is more relevant because it's generally used as a form of investment and as a mode of financing also. Nowadays, certain banks use the concept of ijara in the home financing. Encik Akmal, what are other use of ijara by Islamic banks besides as home financing? Are you there?
For hire purchase financing.
Hire purchase. Okay.
One of the popular using the ijarah.
Oh, for hire purchase. Can you elaborate as an example?
For hire purchase, they call the ITAP.
ITAP, right? ITAP.
Okay, and then concept also the same. Islamic bank as become the customer become the lessee.
Okay.
For example, buying the car.
Okay.
Bank own the ownership of the car.
Okay.
Once the customer full settle, and then we replace back to the customer as the owner.
Okay. Yes.
So on behalf, the concept bank purchase the car from the dealer lah.
Yes. So
after full settlement, and then bank will practice by doing the e-batal, and then cancel the ownership, and then the car will become to the customer name, fully owned lah.
Okay, so after the end of the ijara period, the ownership is transferred to the lessee.
Customer, lessee.
Yeah. Good. So that's the use of ijara in Islamic
For
finance.
hire purchase, Maybank, Afin, CIMB Islamic, and also the rest using the ijarah concept for ITAP lah.
Okay, Maybank, Afin,
In CIMB Islamic, for hire purchase lah. One of the major in the industry lah, all use the ITAP concept.
Besides car financing, what else can they use the hire purchase for? What other commodities? Can they use for
machine for not the for hire purchase usually divide by two. One is for the HP Act under the Hire Purchase Act, and non-HP Act lah. For non-HP Act, example like machine, machinery, And then blanket financing for company buying for production purpose. Also use this concept.
Right. How about home financing? Any bank use the concept of ijara?
I think not so many banks use the concept of ijara for home financing.
I wonder why. Because it's quite easy using the
Ah,
concept of ijara.
ah,
Certain banks use musyarakah mutanaqisah,
yes.
but there's been some legal issues in the contract, some problematic issues. So in my opinion, the concept of ijara is much easier than the concept of musyarakah mutanaqisah.
More simplified to understand lah ijara
Yeah, for both the banks and the
for both
customers.
parties. Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
it's much more simple. So ijara is permissible in Islam based on the Quran, the Sunnah, and Ijma. So there's no problem uh, regarding the legality of ijara. There are many verses in the Quran, many hadith, and also ijma, which give the permission to use the contract of ijara. Let's look at the essential elements of ijara. There are several essential elements of ijara contract. There is the contracting parties, the lessor and lessee, the asset, the usufruct and service, lease period, and rental amount. To be acceptable as a valid contract of ijara, it must meet all the conditions. Number one is contracting parties. According to Shafi'i, the contracting parties, the lessor and the lessee must be a person of sound mind, aqil, legal age, baligh, and free of legal restrictions. Means not muflis, and also musarraf, being able to control the commodity. In other words, the ijara contract can only be entered into by a party who is authorized to deal in wealth. So uh, it can use the concept of wakalah also. So in other words, the contracting parties may involve the lessor and the lessee, and sometimes it involves an agent also. With regards to baligh, the Hanafis allow the ijara contract executed by a minor who has attained the tamyiz age, means he's able to, his mumayyiz is also allowed by Hanafis. Mumayyiz means the person has the ability to differentiate between the good and the bad. So the Malikis view that a mumayyiz minor may enter into a contract of ijara, but its execution will only be possible with the consent of the guardian or the parents. The Shafi'is and Hanbalis, on the other hand, view that the age of majority, means baligh, is a requirement for a valid contract of ijara. Number two, the asset. The leased asset shall be non-consumable asset, and it must have a valuable use. Thus, things having no usufruct at all cannot be the subject matter of the leasing. For example, the car, if the car cannot move, so it has no usufruct at all. Or if the usufruct is not extractable without consuming it, then it also cannot be the subject matter of leasing. For example, um, what, a certain commodity where the usufruct is not extractable without consuming it. What's the example? I cannot find any example. So the thing is, the usufruct must be of any use. For example, a house. If the house cannot be, if the house, if the lessee cannot use the house to live in, for example, the house is locked or the house has no electricity, no water, then the house cannot be the subject matter of leasing. Okay, if the car is broken down, cannot move, it cannot be the subject matter. And the lessor must have, of course, the full ownership or authority over the leased asset. And if the leased asset belongs to another party, permission is needed for its execution. So someone, okay, for example, there is a management company who manage the leasing of properties. Um, so the lessee in this case doesn't have to meet the owner because the assets is managed by the third party, or we call the management company. So in that case, there must be a contract signed by the owner of the property for the use of the usufruct. If a property jointly owned by two or more persons can be leased out, a property jointly owned by two or more persons can be leased out to third party, and the rental shall be distributed between the joint owners according to the proportion of their respective shares in the property. Abu Hanifa, Zufar, and the Hanbalis ruled that a jointly owned property may not be leased without the consent of all the owners. However, Abu Hanifa permitted one partner leasing from the other partner. On the other hand, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad permitted leasing jointly owned property to one of the partners or to any other partners. In this regard, they ruled that the usufruct may be delivered by removing obstacles, as in the case of a sale. In fact, the lease is just like the sale. Any questions so far? So the first one is the contracting parties. The second one is the leased asset. And the third one is the usufruct or services.
Doctor, I
Yes,
want to ask one question.
sure.
Basically, we buy a car using the al-ijarah, and then the car we use for a rent to other people. And if person, if it's person, personable, yes.
Oh, I see. So, for example, a lessee lease a car, right? And then the lessee now wants to what do you call? He will lease the car to another third party, right? So, for example, A is the owner or the lessor. Okay, B is the lessee, and B now try to um, lease as B is now try to lease to another party C. Is that the question? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
He is permissible.
So there are three parties, right? A, for example, is the owner.
Help
B
the owner.
is the lessee. Okay. And now B is now, can B now lease the car to another party C, right?
Yes.
So the answer is yes. But B must ask the permission from A because A is the owner. If A permits B to lease the car to someone else, then it is okay. However, if A says no, you cannot lease my car to someone else.
How
Because,
about the rental car, I mean, kereta sewa. We're doing a kereta sewa.
mhm.
Is that we must get permission from the bank first to doing the kereta sewa.
Okay. So A now is the bank.
Yeah.
Your question is now A is the bank, right?
Yeah. So we're doing the actually ijara concept. And then after
Okay.
that, we buy 2 or 3 car, and then we
Okay.
doing the kereta sewa lah. That's why it's
Using the
good.
concept of ijara.
We get permissible from the bank to doing the this one. This is one of
Oh, that's a good question. In practice, Encik Akmal,
Okay, for usually for the car in Malaysia, we govern under the Hire Purchase Act. In the Hire Purchase Act, the applicant or the lessee have to inform to the bank if the purpose buying for the third party financing or to become a car rental.
there is no issue lah.
But first have to inform the bank lah, the purpose of buying the unit, because the bank are the owner of the unit.
right?
If not informed, can be charged under the Hire Purchase Act lah, third party financing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Encik Akmal.
Welcome.
Any other question?
Yes, sir. I have one question.
Yes.
Now about the ijara contracts. Example, if I have my own car or my own house, so it's allowed to me. I can rent this car and the house, right? So for profit, right?
For rent, yes.
Yeah, the rent home or the car.
Yeah.
So I can rent ijara, so I can get profit, right?
It is called
the profit. This is it.
It is called compensation. Yes.
So, okay, so this profit or the money that I get is it included in zakat or not? So I have to pay zakat for this one or not?
Okay. Yes, you have to pay zakat because
One of source income.
yes, there is called employment income zakat.
I mean this if I don't open the company friend card or I don't have example I'm a student, I'm still a student, but sometimes I rent the car maybe 1 day, 2 days, and the money will finish directly.
Yes, what you have to do is you have to sum. You have to sum means you have to add your income.
Okay.
For zakat, you have to add your income if you have any income.
Okay.
Plus any ijara or rent.
Okay.
Okay, and if the income plus the rent plus any other income,
Okay.
plus other income, if they reach nisab, if they reach nisab,
Okay. I have to pay.
then you have to pay. You have to
Oh.
add. If it doesn't reach nisab, then you don't have to pay.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
Uh, for income zakat, remember for income zakat there is no howl. There is no howl. You
Because
pay.
because
You
because
pay.
it. Huh.
You pay
Okay.
after
Okay.
you receive. Yes.
Okay. Because the difference between the guy opens a company for rent cars and different between and another one the personality car. Like example, some shop for rent car, right?
Yes.
So this guy, of course, have to pay the car because he have already have company, so I
Yes.
can get buffet every day.
Yes.
The difference between the personality person, so maybe here in car today, so maybe 1 week,
Uh,
no rent. Sometimes have money, sometimes no money.
you still have to pay zakat if it reach the certain amount of nisab, and the nisab is 85
Oh,
grams.
okay, okay, okay.
The nisab is 85 grams of gold. So right
Okay.
now the nisab is about 20,000, about 20,000. So if
20,000 in a big year.
yes, if
Okay.
you don't have to wait for a year. Once it reach 20,000, for example, just for example, oh right, yeah, 20,000 for a year, right?
Yeah, well, yes, because income.
Yes. For example, someone has um, income of let's say 2,000 per month, right? 2,000
Okay.
per month, and then 2,000 times 12
Okay.
is 24,000.
Okay.
Okay, so the income is 24,000 plus sometimes he rents his car.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe one
so
day, 2 days, or maybe
maybe
1 week.
yeah, so maybe 1 week he gets for example
400,
400
500.
400 for example, right?
Okay.
So 24,000 plus 24,000
400.
400.
Okay.
So and then times 2.5. Then he pays the amount of zakat in that amount, 2.5%,
Okay.
2.5% or 0.025 times 24,400. So
Okay.
that's the amount he has to pay.
This situation, sir, if I have income every month, how about the student or people that have work?
Then it will not reach the nisab.
Yeah.
So
So no need to pay zakat.
no need to pay zakat. If it doesn't reach nisab, then no need to pay zakat.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Any other question?
Kalau padi field, kalau kita sewa rent padi field tu is one of concept jarah.
Depends. Depends. It doesn't have to be the concept of ijara. Paddy field now, they use the concept of power, huh? Some use the concept of power, some use the concept of ijara. Yeah, it can use many concepts. For example, for one relong, you pay, for example, 700 per season, right? That is ijara. Okay? You need to pay certain amount Okay, Ijara. Nowadays, sometimes 400, sometimes 500. It depends on the location of the paddy field.
Oh, this one rent.
Ijara. Yes. So in my kampung, it's very expensive. For one relong, the ijara or the rent is 700 per relong per season. So it means for one
What
relong,
I expect.
the lessee needs to pay 1,400 per year. Okay, 700 ringgit per relong. Yes, it's using the concept of ijara. Okay, so how much compensation depends on the two contracting parties. Ridha al-muta'aqidain. If the two parties agree on certain amount of compensation or rent, then it should be all right. You know, for example, if someone has rented the paddy field for a long time and the owner doesn't increase the rent. So for example, 10 years ago, the rent was 300. Until now, it still pays 300. But for a new lessee, usually they charge 700 per relong.
Oh,
Now it's expensive. Huh?
yeah.
Yeah, very expensive. I think one long have one ton padi or 2 ton padi. It means 1,000 or 2,000 something with subsidy. Maybe after deduction of the rank of the 1,000 estimate, how much the they are doing.
So you should buy paddy field and then rent it. You can buy. So it's a good time to buy paddy field now. But the price is also going up. It used to be one relong cost something like 30,000. Now some paddy field they sold for 60 or 70,000 per relong. Because the price is going up, so the rent is also going up. But you know, I feel sorry for the lessee. You know, they need the paddy field. Uh, if they have to pay very high rent, I don't know how they can survive. You know, because there's no guarantee that
Can get the 100%.
yeah, you can get the certain amount of money.
Sometimes disaster. Mm,
Yes,
mm,
sometimes yes. Sometimes there are disasters like heavy rain or flood.
like,
Yeah, correct, correct. They
So
have a lot of trouble doing the padi field.
yeah, so
too risky.
I feel sorry for those those who have to depend on
The steady income.
their paddy income because I think some of them they don't have any other skill. They have the skill to
Mm.
grow paddy, so they have no choice. I have a few friends who are in that situation. Sometimes they complain that it sometimes they didn't even get back the money that they invest. Tak balik modal ya.
Mm.
That's why the government supposed to support the
Subsidy.
subsidy ya,
Right.
increase the subsidy, increase in subsidy.
Yes. And then the government should also consider uh, uh, paying a higher price for paddy. In the Western countries, the farmers, they have many unions, and the unions, they control the price and the quantity of wheat, for example. And they will sell wheat only at a certain price to the factories and to the government. But in Malaysia, we don't have any such unions. So here is a strange thing. The the farmers are the sellers, right? But the price is determined by the buyer. You know what I'm saying? If they want to sell the price to Bernas, the price is determined by Bernas. Or if they want to sell to Achong sawmill, Achong will decide the price. It's very strange. In the US,
Oh,
the farmers
oh,
decide the price through the union. They have union of farmers.
oh.
It's not the
They make
buyers
it,
who set the price. The sellers should set the price.
oh,
But
differentiation.
yeah, that's why some of the farmers in the US, they are rich. Some of them are billionaires. The wheat farmers, even the corn farmers, they own huge corns and they control the price. They will only sell certain amount according to the price that they determine. But we are not there yet. Nobody is thinking along this line. Think about it. Isn't it strange that the buyer determines the price? It should be the seller who determines the price, right? If we go to supermarket, we cannot determine the price. We are the buyer. The seller determines the price.
Mm.
But in the
The
case of
wholesaler,
yeah,
mm.
but in the case of paddy and apa ni rubber getah,
Mm.
it's very strange. The buyers decide the price. The government decides the price, and not the rubber tappers. So
The
that
government only set the ceiling and the floor price.
right. That's true. But I mean, is the sellers, the rubber tappers, they have no power, no say in determining the price. Right.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Kapitalis.
Yeah. So pelik kan?
Pelik.
Hmm. Kesian,
Apa?
kesian. Kesian lah dekat.
Ada orang buat research macam ni. Betul.
Saya buat tahun 94.
19 nampak. Boleh baca nanti. Paper doktor.
Tapi nanti saya cari duk mana. Um,
Boleh.
saya
Nanti kena
mencadangkan,
baca.
saya mencadangkan supaya di pesawah menubuhkan koperasi ataupun union. Misalnya pesawah di Kedah, dia kena ada lah di kalangan pesawah tu orang yang ada knowledge tentang koperasi. So buat macam koperasi lah ataupun union. So koperasi inilah yang akan kontrol kuantiti dan kontrol price. Dan dia ada negotiating power untuk pergi bargain dengan Bernas, pergi bargain dengan apa tu kilang-kilang kan. Kalau nak beli, ini harga yang kami nak jual. Kalau tidak, kami tak mau jual. Dia kena ada power macam tu lah. Di US, dia berjaya lah di US. Okay.
So kira macam tertindas lah golongan ni.
Ya, tertindas. Memang tepat sekali, tertindas.
Kira kategori zalim ke tak ni?
That's how it works. Apa ni, macam tu lah. Kalau kita tak kuat, kita akan ditindas. Kan? Dunia ni memang macam tu lah kan. Kalau kita ada kuasa, then baru kita boleh berjuang nasib kita lah. So, malangnya bagi pesawah-pesawah ni, sorry to say lah, tak ada di kalangan mereka yang ada vision untuk menubuhkan union ke, buat koperasi pesawah ke kan. Tak ada vision macam tu, tak ada education, tak ada vision. So saya pun buat kerja macam tu je lah, hilang mana dah. Sebab apa ni, kita lecturer je kan, tak ada siapa nak dengar juga kan. Boleh bagi cadangan.
Orang kampung tu.
Usaha kat pejabat zakat lah.
Orang kampung kan, kesian lah kan. Mereka mana tahu kan. Saya pun kadang masa kecil-kecil tu duk bincang, duk tanya-tanya pakcik-pakcik lah yang di kampung tu. Pasal apa padi Cina yang mai beli, Cina yang letak harga. Saya tanya macam tu. Patutnya kita letak harga kan.
Kita yang tanam.
Kita yang tanam kan, itu barang kita, ikut suka kita nak jual ke tak kan. Harga apa
Dia
kan.
kontrol kot dari segi disposition tu, dia punya apa, dia pengedaran ke,
Bilang wholesale lah.
Itu dia kontrol. That's why dia letak harga besar.
Dia demand and supply. So sebab the supplier doesn't have the power, sebab tak bersatu. Masing-masing tak mau fikir lah. Dia dapat padi nak jual je lah, nak ambil duit kan.
Kadang-kadang betul dia ambil daripada Thailand kan, dia import, dia masuk dalam kelang dia. That's why dia kadang-kadang pemotongan tu kadang dalam 50% ke, 50%, 30%. Itu yang kadang-kadang pengusaha padi ni dia income dia teruk sangat lah.
Betul lah.
Dia kontrol.
Sebab tak ada union, tak ada power, tak ada orang yang nak berjuang kan. Okay. Let's go to the fourth condition, the lease period. The lease period must be agreed and specified in the terms of contract in order to avoid disputes. For example, in the case of the car, what is the lease period? Encik Akmal, usually for car, 9 years, right? The lease,
Maximum 9 years.
yeah, maximum is 9 years. So it can be 9 years or any other period agreed by both parties. So any period are permitted, whether short or long period, no problem, as long as the two parties agree. So in the case of auto financing, can the lessee ask for a shorter period? Yeah, Akmal?
Shorter period mean can usually the normal practice minimum for 2 years.
Okay, so any period between 2 to 9 years.
And then within the 9 years, is customer for full settlement, is allowable to do the early settlement.
Right. And they will give certain discount or
Certain,
they call IBRO, right?
yes, Ibro.
Yeah, certain discount or IBRO for early settlement. Okay. So the lease period shall effectively begin from the time the lessee has the access to the usufruct of the lease asset regardless of whether the lessee has actually utilized the asset or not, and shall terminate at maturity of the period or in the event that the asset is impaired in terms of its function or utility, or when both parties mutually agree to resign the contract. And number 5, the rental amount. The jurists are in consensus that the rental amount must be known and determined at the time of the contract. This is because this is based on the hadith, which means whoever hires an individual must inform him of his wages. So the lease is invalid if the rental amount or rate in any executable phase of the lease is not determined or has been left to the lessor. So the rental amount must be known and must be specific to both the lessee and the lessor. And the contract is void or batil if there is ambiguity or jahala in the rental amount in a manner that leads to a dispute. The lease rental may be in cash or in kind, goods or benefit or service, and the payment may be in installments or in lump sum subject to the agreement by both the contracting parties. IOF Sharia standard clarifies that the lessor's entitlement to the rental runs from the time when the lessee starts to benefit from the asset, or once the lessor makes the usufruct of the asset available to the lessee. So that is the start of the ijara. The lessee is the entitlement for the rental does not necessarily commence on the date signing the ijara contract. The lessee is required to pay rental up to the date of termination. That is because the contract has come to an end and the lessor has no right to collect any rental. The lessor cannot increase the rent unilaterally, and any agreement to this effect is void. For example, the rent for a particular paddy field is 400 for 5 years. Okay, for example. So during the 5 years, the rent cannot be increased unilaterally. Okay, only after the period ended, then the rent can be increased unilaterally. Only after the period of rental expired. Ownership rights and liabilities in ijara contract. The ijara asset, for example, the car, is owned by the lessor, the bank, for example. Yet, the car is in the hand of the lessee to derive its usufruct. Means the lessee can drive the car. As such, the rights and liabilities incidental to the ownership of the leased asset will reside with the lessor, while the rights and liabilities arising from utilization of the leased asset shall be with the lessee. So if the car, for example, has mechanical problems and is due to the use of the car, then the lessee will have to pay for any uh, maintenance cost. Uh, for the case of the house, for example, suppose the window is broken, okay? Who is going to pay, the lessor or the lessee?
The lessee.
Why?
Lessee have to maintain under maintenance everything under the lessee.
Okay. Uh, in the US, the answer depends. Okay. If the window is broken and it is not due to the fault of the lessee, then the renter will pay for the damage. For example, the window is broken because someone else, a stranger, throw a stones at the window. Okay, and uh, it's not done by the lessee. Then the lessor will pay for the damage. So how do you determine whether the window is caused by the lessee, the damage is caused by the lessee or by stranger? How they determine is if the window is broken from outside, then it's not the fault of the lessee. If the window is broken and the source of the damage comes from inside, then it is the lessee's fault. Okay, so that's why it says here, as such, the rights and liabilities incidental to the ownership of the leased asset will reside with the lessor, while the rights and liabilities arising from utilization of the leased asset shall be with the lessee. So if the damage is because of the use by the lessee, then the lessee will need to pay. But I think in Malaysia, to make it simple, um, everything falls on the lessee, and that's why the lessee needs to have the takaful, right? So that any damage will be covered by takaful. Okay, sublease. A leased asset may be subleased to a third party unless it is stated otherwise in the primary lease contract. Since the lessee owns the usufruct, and in principle anyone who owns the usufruct is able to benefit from it for himself and for others, so it is permissible for the lessee to rehire or release the leased asset. So this is the question by Sheikh Shahrul before, right? So in the case of the car, the lessee can lease the car to a third party. However, he needs to inform the bank uh, when when uh, when signing the agreement. It should be in the agreement to avoid any dispute in the future. So it's okay to lease to another party. Penalty for late payment of rent. The amount due by the lessee is considered as a debt and should be subjected to all Sharia rules prescribed for the debt. The lessor shall not charge any additional amount as income in case of delays in payment of the rental. The monetary charge is considered as riba. However, a penalty may be imposed on the lessee in case he delays the payment of rent after the due date, provided that the penalty is given to charity. For this purpose, the financier or lessor may maintain a charity fund where such amounts may be credited and disbursed for charitable purposes. Encik Akmal, do the bank have this charity fund or not?
Oh,
Ada. The penalty tu can consider riba, betul this one for the late payment. I think
Yes. On one hand, it is considered as riba, uh, and then the money should be given to a charity.
this one. How about the takwid? Takwid.
But nowadays,
Yes,
the bank is allowed to charge, but they changed the name. Encik Akmal, what's the name for late payment now?
Takwid this one.
for late payment, if I'm not mistaken, takwid. For Islamic, it charges 1%.
1% kan.
1% under Islamic.
But it's not takwid. It's not considered as a riba, as I know lah.
Yeah, that's why they changed the name. You cannot say the charge on late payment. You have to give a different name, ta'wib. So that is to avoid riba. Otherwise, it is considered as riba. Any charge for late payment. This is because of the ayah in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if the debtor is in a hard time, he has no money, then grant him time until it is easy for him to repay. But if you remit it by way of charity, that is better for you if you did but no. So based on this ayah, some scholars argue that any charge for late payments is considered as riba and should be given to charity. However, in Malaysia, for late payment, it is not considered as riba, ta'wid, because what's the meaning of ta'wid? Encik Akmal.
Takwid it mean
Compensation.
compensation kan. Yeah.
In product disclosure mention compensation charges. Compensation charges on late payment of 1%. Calculate daily will be charged on your monthly installment.
So in banking or accounting terms, it is to compensate for the loss to the bank if the lessee doesn't pay, or if the lessee make a late payment. So in that case, it is not riba. It's just a compensation for the loss by the bank. What is haram is to charge him for late payment to gain for the purpose of gaining profit. So that is considered as riba. However, ta'wib is just a compensation for the loss incurred by the bank because of the late payment, and is a small amount of 1%. So so SAC is quite smart. I'm sure they know about the impermissibility for charging late payment, but they use ta'wib not as a penalty, but rather as a compensation for the bank for the incurred losses.
Betul, I ada share dekat dalam group WhatsApp.
Okay, let me read.
Okay.
So So that is a solution made by SAC, right? Okay. Okay. So if the lessee fail to fulfill the obligations, compensation charge on late payment of 1% per annum calculated daily will be charged on your monthly installment that is due and not paid. So this is different from the uh, charge for a penalty charged for late payment in conventional banks. So it's
For conventional, 8%.
conventional is 8%. So that one is riba.
Yeah.
So this one is just compensation for the loss, and it's just 1%, right?
For conventional, using the penalty charges.
Oh, so for the conventional, it's been riba for the Islamic. This one, how percent? 1% or 8%? Or
Conventional, 8%.
4% Islamic?
1%.
4% actually cheaper.
Because the purpose is different. In conventional, the purpose is, to gain the profit. But in Islamic banks, the purpose is just to compensate for the incurred losses, for the
Yes.
loss incurred by the bank.
That's why we should get the Islamic easily more cheaper than conventional.
Yeah, yeah. There is a chapter on this book on ta'wid and gharama. Okay, so ta'wid is different, right? Ta'wid is permissible. Okay, termination of ijara contract. Ijara contract cannot be terminated in the following circumstances. Breach of the contract of ijara. The ijara contract is a binding contract. Neither party may terminate the contract without the consent of the other party. So any option clause for the lessor to terminate the lease without the consent of the lessee shall be invalid, except in the case of breach or default. So the lessor cannot terminate the contract in any way except in the case of breach or default. How do you define breach or default, Encik Akmal, by bank? How many months of non?
For hire purchase, 2 bulan 21 hari. 2 months and 21 days.
Okay, 2 months and 21 days. So if the payment is not made within that period, it's called a breach or default. And the bank can terminate the contract and repossess the car, right?
First step is bank give the letter of demand and then give another 14 days. And
Okay.
then within 14 days, if customer not update any payment, and then we proceed for the legal another 14 days, and then we will process the unit.
Okay. So it's 40 plus 40 plus 1 month, 21 days, right?
Yeah.
So it's like 41, 51, right? 51 plus 40 plus 40. So 1 month, 21 days is about 51 days. Plus 40 days, plus another 40 days, right?
The 14, 1 4.
Oh, 1 4, sorry. So 51 plus 1 4 plus 1 4.
And
So
then,
it's about 75 days
yeah.
until the car is repossessed.
That's why the they use the ijara for the car only, but not for the housing.
Hmm.
Resale contract, this one.
Yeah. So if they use in the case of home financing, the home can be repossessed also. Even in conventional loan, the home can be repossessed if the payment is not made within certain stipulated time, right? Okay, what happens when one of the parties uh, passed away? The death of any one of the contracting parties will terminate the contract of ijara, according to the Hanafis.
This maybe will follow the contract.
Excuse me, again?
If someone dies, maybe we'll follow the contract. I can say I'll continue until the end of contract, maybe sometime like that.
According to Hanafis, this is just according to the Hanafi school.
Okay.
The death of one of the contracting parties will terminate the contract of ijara. However, Jumhur Ulama, the majority of the jurists, they viewed that the death of contracting parties will not terminate the contract. According to Jumhur Ulama, since ijara is a form of sale and purchase, the right to the usufruct will be inherited to their heirs, their wife or their sons, when one of the parties died. So the contract will not be terminated, but the right of the usufruct is will be inherited to their heirs.
You mean the wife continues paying the monthly installment, that's what?
In the case of the car, uh, the takaful will pay, right? Encik Akmal.
It's optional, but usually customer have option to take the takaful coverage or not.
Yes.
But not Islamic customer don't take the takaful coverage.
Or that's compulsory or not? What?
Not
For the
compulsory.
take. Oh no.
No.
I think right now the bank should compulsory for the taking of the takaful.
We always educate customer lah, but not compulsory. Customer still have the option lah, either to take or not to take.
Yes. So in the case of the death, if the customer choose to have the option of using takaful, then takaful will pay.
And then takaful pay.
Yeah, so it would not be a burden to the heirs.
Yes, but
Yeah.
for housing, compulsory.
Yes, for housing compulsory. Whether you use ijara contract or any other
Any other contract.
They have different situation in this scenario. Suppose whatever I purchase or buying, they have compulsory of buying takaful.
Hmm. So if they choose not to buy the takaful, and for example, the husband or the owner died, and then the wife and the children cannot afford to pay, then the wife can choose to terminate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mean after terminate, they sell the.
They surrender back. Surrender back.
You mean the wife can go to the bank also?
Yes, to surrender.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So it's better if the
to take the
lessee,
takaful.
yeah, if the lessee take the kaful, it's much better. So if anything happens, the lease asset can be inherited to their heirs, and
Yes,
takaful will pay for the rest of the rental
outstanding.
outstanding here.
Mm.
Okay, let's look at modern application of ijara. Ijara is used as a mode of financing. Uh, so in modern Islamic finance, ijara may be used as a mode of financing by Islamic financial institutions with the purpose of enabling customers to use durable goods and equipment such as heavy machines, cars, ships, air, uh, airplanes, without having to buy them. They can just rent. In this context, the customer or the lessee pays a certain amount in cash as rental of the leased asset over a period of time. For example, they want to lease a machine or car for a certain period of time. And the ijara is usually for a long period of time, enough to cover the life of the asset. For example, the car, if we expect the car to last at least 9 years, right? So the maximum period of contract for ijara is 9 years.
So how about the factory? So they use the ijara for the buying equipment for heavy machine.
For certain machine, not the factory, right? For certain machine,
Factory, certain machine.
for certain heavy machine. Encik Akmal, what's the example of certain machines that the bank um, the bank will lease to customers?
Normal practice usually 2 to 5 years only.
The example of the heavy machine?
Usually minimum is 2 years until 5 years only.
Yes.
Because the durable of the machine usually maximum for heavy machine maximum 5 years.
So any heavy machine used by factories, right?
Yes.
Hmm. For example, machine like what?
For manufacturing,
Hmm.
for print, usually the simple example for printing the shirt,
Okay.
and
The,
then machine to example in the heavy duty industry.
hmm. So the period is between 2 to 5 years.
Yes, normal practice.
Because the machine usually lasts
Last usually within 5 years.
within 5 years. Yeah.
And then usually the Islamic bank do not want to take maximum risk. That's the reason.
Right, right. Okay, an example used by the bank is operating lease. An operating lease is a contract that rents out assets for operation. So, for example, machines. In other words, it is a pure rental agreement where the leased asset, for example, the machine, will remain as the property of the lessor, and it is usually returned to the lessor at the end of the lease period, for example, 5 years. The lessor provides maintenance of the asset, and the cost of the asset is not fully amortized over the lease period. In Islamic finance, the operating lease will share the same structure like the conventional finance with necessary elements of Islamic contract of ijara that makes it different from conventional. Some terms and conditions may differ, yet from the structural perspective, they are the same. It can be like a photocopy machine also, right? Certain office they do not want to buy,
Yes.
but they use the ijara concept where they
Tapi
rent the
he
copy
offer
machine for certain period of time. The
And then the
advantage,
vendor machine, like the water filter, also use this concept.
yes, so vendor machine, yes, water filter also, because the advantage is the lessee do not have to worry about the maintenance.
Mm.
The lessor will provide the maintenance. The lessee just pay for the monthly rent, for example. So many government office now just rent the photocopy
how
machine.
about doctor?
Yes,
How about the Kowe concept? Actually, they use the Java concept because sometimes when
yes. Kowe
I
they
buy the Kowe, I supposed to pay every month.
yes, Kowe give options to customers whether they want the what do you call the water filter, right?
Mm.
They want the water filter. Uh, they want to buy the water filter or they want to rent the water filter. So there are two types of contracts that are that the customers can choose. One is to buy, the other one is to rent or ijara. So some office or even some masjid they prefer to use the water filter to use the concept of ijara with Kowe because the masjid or the government office don't have to worry about the maintenance of the water filter. They just pay the monthly rent for a certain period of time. Okay, financial lease is how much the customer or the lessee needs to pay. A financial lease is an essential. A financial lease is similar to a loan because substantially all risks and rewards related to the lease asset pass on to the lessee. The asset will be fully repaid over the lease period through rental payment. The lessee will be given an option to purchase the lease asset after the period ended. For example, the car, in the case of the car, after 9 years, for example, um, the lessee will be given an option to purchase. And of course, it's just like automatic. It's mutually agreed that the ownership will be transferred to the lessee at the end of the lease period. For example, at the end of the 9 month period. And then there is a product called Aimat Al-Ijara Muntahiyat Bitamlik. Aimat. And then Al-Ijara Summal Bay Aita. The application of ITAP in Malaysia. This is how ITAP Al-Ijara Summal Bay or ITAP. So in Malaysia, uh, for example, the customer needs a car, right? a vehicle. So the customer identifies the vehicle, for example, a car, and he or she pays the deposit. Then step number 2, the customers approach the bank and obtain ITAP financing. And then step number 3, the bank purchase the car and obtain and pays the remaining purchase price of the car. So for example, the customer pays 10% and the bank pays 90%. Then step number 4, the bank leases the car to the customer at a rental price, purchase price plus profit with an option to purchase at the end of the financing period. So that's how ITAP is used in Malaysia. ITAP in conventional is called rent to own, right? Rent to own. So during the in ITAP, during the rental period, the asset belongs to the bank. At the end of the rental period, the ownership of the asset is transferred to the lessee or to the customer. Then we have ijara wa iqtina. Okay, so that's all for ijara. You can read the rest of the book, and inshallah next week we will continue with partnership-based contracts, and we'll cover musyarakah, inshallah.
Inshallah, sir.
Doktor nanti share slide ni Doktor.
Saya dah bagi dah kan?
Oh ni ada dah.
Ada.
Oh, okey, abang tu saya tengok.
Tajuk dia
Yang sebelum ni punya lah kan, dalam tu lah.
ya.
Okey.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.